advocating that if there isn't an economic or business case, you should chuck something out. But it is important to consider because this is a huge factor in determining if that program is going to stay or not. So, you know, how do you assess social benefit? You can talk about, is it really making a change in people's net income? Is that taking them off welfare and hence providing a case for the government to continue supporting that program? Or is it providing a profit for the manufacturers? And so on. So you have to look at the costs associated as well as the benefits you're getting on it. The matching person to technology, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but the idea is that you really need to study the consumer as an individual and what does that individual want, need, desire, what are the outcomes that they want from the technology, where do they want to use it, their expectations for it, and you really need to focus on those factors. Service delivery, the one key thing is there are many relevant stakeholders beyond, of course, the consumers, their immediate family, very key, but you're also talking about your rehab professionals, the vendors of AT delivery, policy makers, and input of all stakeholders becomes relevant. So we spoke about asking questions this morning, and maybe sometimes you need to get, of course, questions are very important. We spoke about matching person and technology, but also what do rehab professionals themselves think? Are they allowed to be flexible? Are they allowed to change the procedures for a particular consumer versus another? Plus, you have many things such as, is it a centralized agency? Is it decentralized service delivery system? Are people culturally competent, the service delivery professionals? How are they being funded? How are they getting financing? How do you do AD procurement? And I think the most key is, okay, let's say a service delivery system exists in a country, but is it then reaching out to minority populations, people with disabilities, people in rural areas? How do you do all of that? Knowledge awareness. We've spoken about this as well, and again, I think the key thing to take away is that people don't make instantaneous decisions necessarily about buying assistive technology or using a particular assistive technology. There are different approaches to it. For example, somebody first needs to know that a product exists. They need to understand how to use it, how they are going to use it in their life. And finally, this principles knowledge thing, which I got from the diffusion of innovations by Rogers, where he's talking about people sometimes need to know what the underlying principles are to prevent abandonment or misuse. But the whole spectrum of knowledge awareness. And I'm almost near the end. The political government context, we just finished speaking about the convention, and I think the idea over here is really, do you have a supportive political climate? Let's say you do have actual laws that recognize your rights as individuals with disabilities to full economic, social participation. Maybe that actually encourages people to have better accessibility in their services. Does it then help to provide funding through large grants to NGOs or DPOs or universities to set up these kinds of systems? Are there tax incentives to promote manufacturing and distribution of AT? And finally, the cultural issue, and I don't think I need to really talk about this much more, rather than I think really the idea is you need to be able to ask the right questions. You need to understand a person's culture. You need to understand not only individual culture, but the societal culture they're coming from, to understand and interpret their messages. For example, there was, and I don't think this falls just under cultural competency, but somebody once did a study where they, to provide women in, I think it was a region in India, with wheelchairs. And things were not working out, and women were not really using the wheelchairs, and they went and asked them why. And the women said, for us to really be able to participate, we need things that can help us squat on the ground, because we don't have like a cooking range, we don't have tables. Everything we do is done on the floor. So you need to give us something that helps us, be mobile on the floor. So you just really need to understand the local context. I skipped the impacts and outcomes. But I think the idea is we didn't really do anything new, but there is a lot of literature on how do you assess AD outcomes. And of course, more psychological measures such as satisfaction and well-being, but also is it really resulting in the intended outcomes? Well, that's a lot of information dump, but I think the idea was, can we then really say, okay, these things work, and then can we put them in a framework so that the next time you want to approach, approach the creation of a program somewhere, can you use these as a starting point? Can we develop quality indicators under each of these categories that will help you to think through these ideas and help you to put together a program that's appropriate? Of course, this is a framework out there. A lot of people throw frameworks. We've not tested it. We've not validated it. So maybe that's a next step. And I don't just mean scientific empirical research, although that is also important, but also anecdotal research to really try and understand whether something like this works. And I'm going to leave it here before they throw me out. But I think rather than just questions and answers, of course, if you have questions, I will try to have answers, but I think even your ideas, if you can think about what we've tried to create here, if you think this might work, what can we do as the community that's working in this region to help us plan out good, effective programs. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I like the idea of a framework, and of course, in assistive technology, there are other means of quality indicators, other frameworks that are out there. But to look at something specific for this kind of work is really important. I guess I'm a little overwhelmed with how this might work in such a huge, wide range of cultures and countries and political environments, and it's one thing. I guess it's sort of like when I think about the work we're doing in the city project, we finally got it in our brains to focus in on one region, because at least there's like language and like laws and like history and that kind of thing. When I'm thinking of this, there's so many variables out there because you've got an entire world. And so I wonder how that factors in.
I think that's a great question, and it helps me to clarify this a bit. I don't think the idea was this framework gives us answers to everything all at once. It's an idea, so let's say you want to go to a particular region in Ecuador, and you want to assess really what the AD needs are over there, and then how you could try and fulfill those needs. So your question can be a very narrow question. And by narrow I don't mean narrow-minded, but sometimes you need something that's specific and an intervention that's specific. So our idea was, can we give you something to help you design that specific intervention that will help you to think about just the things that, surrounding that situation, and not all the cultures around the world, but what about the culture in that little village in Ecuador? Or what are the user needs, or what are the user expectations just in that little region? I think one issue you raised is, or maybe, I think one issue I can raise is that maybe it's too much. Can somebody who's, a community practitioner who's trying to do something, or a disaster-prone area, disaster-struck area, are you really going to be sitting and going through this intensive framework and doing this huge checklist? That is one concern I do have with something of this sort. It may be too comprehensive to use or too difficult to use. But I don't know if I helped answer your question a bit.
I think all the points on your framework are great. And I'll tell you they work, because I use them every day to evaluate what we're doing in different programs. But I think just about a month ago I met a gentleman, he works in Kenya, who's a German economist who runs the Kenyan Disability Association. And he does all of these things that you mentioned too, trying to balance all